So welcome everybody to the Astrology Exchange Hour with Monte, Farber, and me, William Stickevers. Today is October 30th, 2021, and we're going to talk about Halloween, divination, and the gaslighting of America.
Correct. I can't wait.
Yeah, so it's here. It's been, I think we did a show this time last year, exactly on October 30th, around this time. And a lot's happened since then. And
oh my God, yes.
Right. So I figured that, this is sort of like the time of year where people get their readings and do divinations and they get back into magic, or they dabble into magic, or they get their first seance. There's all sorts of things people do. They go out trick-or-treating.
Yes.
I'm already prepared. I have my enchanted spellbound board.
Oh my God.
Yep. If you can see it, I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it?
No, for some reason,
No,
the green
it's not showing up. Yeah, I have my,
okay. I got it.
I have my sewing book from Llewellyn. You see that?
Yeah, for some strange reason.
Yeah. Okay, so I have that. I also have my pumpkin here, right, sitting in the back of me. I'm all set to go for Halloween. So
wait a minute. I'll show you. Wait. This is what William was holding up. It's the Enchanted Spell Board, Magical Messages from the Spirit World, which I did with my wife, Amy Zerner. And we did that for Barnes & Noble. And it's still in print. And it's the follow-up to the Psychic Circle.
I bought it back when it was only $27.95.
Yes. Well, the price of plastics and everything else has gone up, and paper. Mm-hmm. We can talk about the supply chain gaslighting, about how nothing to see here, everybody, just 100 ships off the coast of California and New York.
Right.
I mean, the gaslighting never ends. We should start having gas lit lights in our houses. That's right. How much gaslighting is going on. But those are the spell boards. Yeah. I mean, right now it's easier. Amy's having an art show in Southampton on November 6th, and it's real easy to get publicity because it's Halloween. Meanwhile, she doesn't do spooky or Halloween art. She just oh my God, thank you for that.
Yeah, this is from last year's slide.
Oh, they're still in print.
They're still in print.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, you can get the Enchanted Tarot at Spencer Gifts, speaking of Halloween, when you're getting your Halloween on sale stuff for next year.
That's right. And Monte's latest creation is the Wild Goddess Oracle.
Oh my God, this is good. Thank you so much for doing these.
Oh, no problem.
Thanks to you and Catherine for this. Yeah, the Wild Goddess Oracle, you can actually get it at TJ Maxx or Home Goods. But you can get it, of course, in your local bookstore. We want everybody to go to the local bookstores. This was our pandemic project. Because to feel normal, Amy started doing paper collages of goddesses, and when the student's ready, the teacher appears, and one of our publishers called us up and said, "I'm looking for something. Do you have anything?" And Amy said, "Yeah, the Wild Goddess Oracle." And then I had to figure out what the hell that was, and then we did it.
Sounds great. And the next one is this one here, the Enchanted Worlds coloring book.
Well, that's the coloring book. The Enchanted Worlds is actually, and this is a problem we're having with whatchamacallit, with good old
Amazon.
With Amazon, because there was a coloring book which we did for which we did for HarperCollins, and it has the same name. And anyone who's ever dealt with Amazon knows that they're not the easiest people in the world to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And we keep telling them, no, it's not that. It's a completely different book, but that is not enough for them. So watch this. I have the Amazon page up here now. This is what we're talking about. The Enchanted Worlds of Visionary Collages and Art Couture of Amy Zerner. That's the one we're talking about. So, and that'll be available soon. Once again, supply chain disruption, which you predicted,
mm-hmm.
and I predicted a little later, is a real thing, even though the U.S. Department of Agriculture does not think so.
Right. Absolutely. It's just it's systemic, and it's spreading into every sector of our economy, into our culture. and the plausible deniability of the body politic, if you will, is falling apart very quickly.
Yes. Yes, and that does that, and the gaslighting is part of that. That's why we're talking about the gaslighting, because what's the best way to, when you're doing a psyops, when an army is going up against another country, what you want to do is either confuse or demoralize your enemy, and that's what's happening. That's the overarching thing. But who's the enemy and who's, all I know is we are just trying to live our lives on a daily basis, and every day they throw some more, don't trust who you're going to believe, me or your lying eyes, like the old joke about the guy whose wife finds him in bed with someone else, and he says, I'm not in bed with anybody. Who are you going to believe?
I mean, it's even, so we'll get into it later, but it just applies to almost everything. I have people arguing with me, we're not in a bubble. Just because my house is worth 4 times as much or 3 times as much as it was 3 years ago, we're still not in the bubble. My real estate broker told me they know better than you, all this stuff. So,
well, there's a perfect example. There's Enchanted Worlds. That's not the right Enchanted Worlds, but it's a good coloring book.
Yeah, I figured that. It said 2016, so I knew it wasn't the right one, but I figured I wanted to show people here that a new book called Enchanted Worlds is coming out. So look for it on Amazon at some point. It will be out there, and until then, you can get your Wild Goddess Oracle.
You're funny. No, the books are doing really well. They keep selling out, and the problem is the supply chain stuff. That makes the problems for restocking.
Right.
Like the Enchanted Tarot hit the warehouse, and between Amazon, who doesn't usually buy a lot of books, and Spencer Gifts, 4,000 copies went out in one day.
Yeah,
which is a lot.
That's a lot indeed.
It's a lot, but the reason we do what we do is not just to earn a living, but it's to help people, and that's what the purpose of our talk today is. Oh my God, you have such great visuals.
Yeah, I mean, I was putting this together. I actually put this together for my group before we did GTA. I actually did a number of live mediumship, where everyone, it was over 50 people, would ask me a mediumship question and I would answer it. And I did pretty well. And I was studying mediumship pretty seriously. Serious in terms of I was taking classes and private lessons. And, I was told by my 2 different teachers, evidential medium. And for some reason or other, it didn't really gel with me, even though I could do it and I can do it. But what it got me into is really looking into the roots of divination, and the roots of divination go all the way back to the Celtic Harvest Festival. Now, divination is not just specific to the Celtic period, the Celtic era, but or the Harvest Festival, but it's pervasive. It's something people do, whether they're conscious of it or not. But the Halloween tradition originates from the ancient Celtic Harvest Festival, and this Gaelic festival called Samhain or Samhain, right? So I think Samhain is the correct way. Samhain, it looks like Samhain or Samhain, right? And it was actually the first and most important of the 4 quarter days in a medieval Gaelic calendar. It was celebrated on October 31st through November 1st. So that is the tradition of Halloween in terms of how we celebrate it, in terms of its seminal, in terms of the seminal event. However, Halloween goes through this interesting revolution. And one thing about Halloween, Samhain, is it's a festival and marks the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter, or the darker half of the year. And it was associated with death. Guess why? Guess why, Monte? It's associated with death.
Well, because if you don't plan properly for the winter, you die.
Plan properly. And there was a higher rate of people dying during the winter. A lot of people just didn't make it through the winter.
We were talking about that today. Amy and I were talking about how many of our friends and family died at this time of the year, and up until Christmas and the new, around the new year.
So the death rate worldwide, and when I say worldwide, I'm talking the northern hemisphere,
Right.
The
No, of
world
course.
begins starting November 1st and peaks January 23rd, and then begins to decline.
Day after
So
my birthday.
that's right.
After
So,
me, the deluge.
all right. So it's considered like a liminal period. The beginning of this period, it's a liminal time when the boundary between this world and the spirit world thinned. That boundary thins, and this meant that the spirits of the fairies, now fairies, entities, earth entities, all types of entities, could more easily come into this world and communicate. And they were particularly active, and they participated in the festival, and in a way were the mechanisms behind the divination itself.
Right.
Like channeling, if you will.
Yeah.
So this is where, and then people offered food and drinks, and portions of their crops were left outside for these spirits. And this is all about ensuring that people and their livestock would survive the winter. Because remember, winter would really start in November and last all the way through early March.
Right. I in my book Karma Cards, I talk about how the signs correspond to the seasons in the northern hemisphere. I know the people in the southern hemisphere and around the equator look at me like I'm crazy when I talk about it, but when you think about, just for example, the sign Pisces, by the sign Pisces, it's the last sign of winter. If you haven't planned right, everybody's starving, and
right.
That's when the strong would have to sacrifice and do all
Right.
that Piscean compassionate stuff
Right.
for the weaker, for the children, and
Yeah.
there really is a correspondence between that. I love this image with the guy dunking for apples, but keep in mind that all this was evolving at the same time with the church.
Right. Absolutely. We're going to get to that in a minute. Oh yeah,
Right.
I'm going to get to that in a minute. But apples and nuts were often used in these divination rituals.
Yes. Yeah.
So you would petition the spirit or the souls of the dead, and then use apples and nuts and all sorts of apple bobbing, note rusting, scrying, mirror gazing, pouring molten lead or egg whites into water as a way to find out, right, to interpret, right, to interpret the divination. And this divination would basically be a 6-month divination. Would I be fine? Would my stock, would my livestock survive?
Right. Exactly.
So it wasn't necessarily, am I going to get rich and famous and become an Instagram, movie star, right? That type of thing.
Right. It's like the way it's becoming now. People want to just survive the craziness.
Right. Right. So it's like a lot of it was just basically dealing with survival, and it was also connected with, in Asia, there's a big tradition, and even in South America, where you recognize and honor the dead.
Yes.
And you give libation, and you give homage and all of that to the dead. This was also just a 2-day period where candles would be lit and prayers would be formed, offered for the souls of the dead, believing that, by reestablishing, sending messages, reconnecting with especially people who did not survive the year. Because remember, the rate of attrition, what was the average life? Well, the average life
30,
up until
28.
Well, actually, during the time of Jesus, that was true, right? About between 30, 35. But in the medieval period, particularly when the Celtic Harvest Festival was happening and Samhain was happening, it was around somewhere, for men, it was in their 50s, but for women, it was in their late 30s due to gynecological issues.
Right. And childbirth deaths.
Correct. So the average man would live to 55, and the average woman would live somewhere around 40, 41. And if you look at grave markers, you would see, and many men married much younger women in their 40s and 50s, and that would be the second wife. And this was very common, even in America, prior to World War I.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
Women have gotten a raw deal. That's one of the things we're trying to balance out with the Wild Goddess Oracle, but that's for another show.
Yeah. So also, so there was a lot to this, and there was in Scotland, there were bonfires, and divination games also became popular in Wales. Bonfires were lit to prevent souls of the dead from falling to earth. And so it really varied a bit, but it all basically centered in that part. And then it spread to the rest of Europe. And so All Hallowtide, as it was originally called, October 31st to November 2nd, the original date was 835 AD. And this was Pope Boniface IV dedicated the Pantheon in Rome in honor of all Christian martyrs. And the Catholic Feast of All Martyrs Day was established in the church. And then that was moved to November 1st, 835 AD in the Frankish kingdom. So the Frankish kingdom was essentially France, right? That basically took over most of the collapsed Western Roman Empire in this, it was like the early medieval era. And so Halloween goes all the way back to the early medieval era that officially started on Christmas Day, 800 AD, when Charlemagne became the emperor of the Frankish kingdom.
When Pluto and Saturn got together in Capricorn. Just like for the pandemic.
Right. So it's again commemorating the dead at the beginning of winter. Their winter actually started on October 31st on All Hallowtide. So this is actually beginning of their agricultural winter.
Right.
And this is interesting because and it connects with, Christian observance of All Saints Eve, All Saints Day, Christian martyrs, All Souls Day. And so it's basically about, it's sort of like a period where a time of dying in nature, a time of transition in nature. And if you look at the chart here, this is the beginning of the first Halloween, when the sun sets on October 31st. This is All Hallows Eve, October 31st, 835 AD.
Wow.
And this would be, so it's interesting because you see the sun, Saturn in Scorpio conjunction.
And you see yes. And Neptune.
The sickle, the death. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you have the Uranus and Pluto conjunction in Pisces, which I've been seeing a lot of people have been reading for lately, because that did occur in our lifetimes. Well, actually, of course, it occurs every 80 years, approximately every 80 years. And the whole Piscean thing, because of the sorrow associated with death. But in those days, death was more of a part of life than it is now. Just like you were saying, in South America, Day of the Dead,
Mexico,
and in China, where they wear white to funerals, they don't wear black, and white is the color of death in China. And they have a holiday it's not a holiday, it's a holy day. Called Qingming. That's when everybody in China goes home to make sure that the burial place of their ancestors is maintained correctly, and they honored the dead. They have like 100, 200 million people on the road. It's a big deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal. And so there's a veneration and honoring of the dead.
Yes.
And this was happening as well. So they were doing it through agricultural festivals that represented multiple things. And it was a merger of the growing Christian culture that fused with the already established pagan culture in those different parts of Europe, throughout the Frankish kingdom and in the British Isles.
Right. Yes, because the Christian church had a really good record for taking pagan holy sites and making churches on them.
That's right. And then integrating many of those different festival activities into the Christian festival, like, for example, with Christmas,
the classic example, or Easter.
Yes. So what they did back in the day, when around 835 onward, especially by the end of the 12th century in the 1100s, All Hallows Day became the holy day of obligation across Europe, involving a tradition like where people would go door to door ringing church bells for the souls in purgatory. So purgatory became a big issue a big thing. It became a doctrine of the Catholic Church. And remember, up until 1518, there was Christendom. So you had all these different little warring, I would say early medieval nation state kingdoms. They were like medieval kingdoms, right? That were all under the umbrella of the Catholic Church. And then purgatory is introduced. And purgatory is, it's not quite, it's not hell, but it's not heaven. And most souls, according to Catholic doctrine, go to purgatory.
Right.
And so there's this connection of Halloween, All Hallows Eve, as it was called, and the Feast of the Dead. And what would happen, and this is where we get people going door to door to door. It was customary for criers dressed in black to parade in the streets, ringing a bell of mournful sound and calling on all good Christians to remember the poor souls. And then they would go door to door singing and putting on a show, if you will. It was called souling, and the custom. So yeah. So trick-or-treating goes back to souling. And the idea was you would go door to door, you would bring your instruments and bells, and you would sing. And most of these people were very unruly, by the way. And they were asking in return for a custom soul cake, a soul cake for all Christian souls. So that's called, right. So it's a custom of baking and sharing a soul cake, and that is the origin of the trick-or-treating. So in return for our venerating the dead and going door to door and you would get a cake in return. You would get the soul cake. And actually you can find out how a soul cake was exactly made, right? And there's actually a song. They would actually sing this song here: a soul, a soul, a soul, please good miss, a soul cake, right? An apple, a pear, a plum, or a cherry, any good thing to make us all merry. 1 for Peter, 2 for Paul, 3 for him who made us all. So that was the idea of trick-or-treating.
Amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. You should look up soul cakes, how to make a soul cake.
Right? I am absolutely surprised they don't already exist in the stores, especially at this time of year. And in those days, an apple, a pear, a plum, or a cherry that was rare. I mean,
very rare.
Especially when you're talking about this time of year, because only the people who grew stuff had stuff at this time, or people who could afford it. It wasn't like it is now, where they're out of season here, but we get them from some other place. And now we're going back into that time with the supply chain problems. We're not being able to get everything that we want 24/7, 365 and a half.
Right. And by the way, I put the recipe of the soul cake on my blog. It's under the Halloween article. So people go to my blog and just put in Halloween in a search engine. Inside of my blog, you'll see the article. It's in depth about the entire history of Halloween, along with the soul cake tradition and how to make a soul cake, a modern day soul cake.
It's getting me hungry.
Yeah, I am. I'm getting hungry too. So let's go on. So let me, I skipped ahead. Did I skip ahead? Yeah, I think really? So then Halloween sort of fades out a bit. And hello, are you there?
I'm here. Yeah.
Okay.
I just saw the Ouija board. I had to put up our counter to the Ouija board is the circle.
It's psychic circle. Yes. Right. Yeah. You want to talk about the psychic circle before we get into the spiritualism of 1849?
Yeah, well, you're showing the Ouija board, and in the 70s, back in the 70s, we still have the original handmade notes for this. We started getting, we found a Ouija board in a thrift shop, and Amy has the ability to do it herself, and she was doing it, and one day it went up to the top where it says, in between yes, no, it has the word Ouija, and it says copyright William Fuld.
Yes.
And she was doing it, and it said, William Fuld was my brother. I am Van Fuld, and I have, and he stole the idea from me, and I have something for you. And like I said, I'm sitting right next to this closet that has the original hand-done notes that we took during that time.
Wow.
And he says, you're going to do the psychic circle. And he described it. And there's Amy spelling this out with me taking the notes. And wait, I don't have the psychic circle up. And the circle is 18 inches, which was a big issue about how to do it. And then in the same session, we got the name for karma cards, which was my first The first book. And it turns out that William Fuld actually did have a brother, whether he was ripped off or not.
Yeah, that's
So,
right. There's a interesting history about the Ouija board.
oh
Very,
yeah,
very
it
interesting
goes back to
history.
Pythagoras. The talking boards go back to Pythagoras, and in China they'll take a chopstick and jam it through a basket and move it over a bed of rice and let it write out a character, one
Right,
character at a time. And there's a big tradition for talking boards.
right. Well, actually, the there was a massive spiritualist movement that correlated with I
Yeah,
believe there was a number of astrological alignments that were happening in the 1840s, and it started in the burned over district in upstate New York along Route 20. And this region of New York State was an area where there was a lot of spiritual metaphysics. There was a lot of metaphysical spiritual communities that were operative there since the American Revolution.
well, New York State isn't that where the Mormons started also?
Yes, the
Because
Mormons started right in the burned over district, along with many other Universalist church. I mean, if we, the list goes on and on and on. And a lot of
yeah,
people don't realize that the Ouija board comes out of that area. In fact, the Ouija board as we have it today, there's not one like it prior. Now, there's other divination methods that as you mentioned, to go back to China and Greece and Egypt, but not quite like what we see
right,
with the Ouija board, which is a major advancement
yeah.
in divination technology, if you will.
Well, exactly. That's why when we did the psychic circle, we tried to improve on the Ouija board, and people sold it as a toy,
Right.
and we didn't want them to sell it as a toy, because it's not a toy. It's an instrument for getting. I mean, the Changing Light of Sandover won every book award, and it was written with a Ouija board, with a talking board. But I think it was Merrill, James Merrill, or somebody wrote this, or somebody. That's who
Right.
that wrote it. So we tried to improve on the Ouija board. But if you look back in 1849, that's the last time Uranus was in Taurus and Neptune was in Pisces. That's before.
Yeah.
It's
So we look at looking at the chart here. Yeah, I'm just looking here. This happened. It's interesting that the date of spiritualism officially starts on November 14th, 1849. And that's when the Fox sisters demonstrated their spiritualist rapping in the Corinthian Hall in Rochester. And this was the first public demonstration of spiritualism held before paying public, along with the press. And it's considered, and then this followed with a long history of public events featured by spiritualist mediums and leaders throughout the United States. So it all started on that date. And we actually have the time.
That's amazing.
So this is the chart of spiritualism. And you could see the new moon in Scorpio.
Yeah, moon in Scorpio conjunct the sun, and then there's Neptune in Pisces. But Uranus hadn't gotten into Taurus yet.
But what's interesting is if you go back to the 835 chart of All Hallows Eve, you had a Uranus-Pluto conjunction. Look what you have here.
Yeah,
Uranus-Pluto conjunction.
Right. I mean, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Along with the fact that you have it's interesting. You see the new moon at 23 degrees of Scorpio, which is a very psychic degree within Scorpio. And many people born November 14th, 15th have, you see quite a number of psychics born around that time or who have planets in that, not just in that sign, in the sign of Scorpio in those two set of degrees, right? 22, 23 degrees of Scorpio. What you also see here is,
well, also this Uranus Pluto that you showed back in 800 and now 8 whatever, and now this
835
that during the 60s, during the 1960s.
So we're gonna get to that. Yeah, we're gonna get to that in a minute. No, that's fine. It's just I want to just say, like, you're seeing correlation when people say there's astrological history, there's correlation not only with biology and families, but with history.
Right. Uranus and Pluto together is spiritualism somehow, depending on the sign and the other stuff.
Right. Well, what happened, what's interesting here is that there was a shift where there was the emergence of purgatory and veneration of the martyrs and the saints and all that stuff.
Right.
In 835, then we see the emergence of spiritualism, which is another spiritual upgrade, not just with the fact that they created the Ouija board, the fact that you see the emergence of spiritualism where God is defined as a supreme intelligence, right? Not right. It's like a
Yes.
completely different approach to divinity,
Yes.
and that you can communicate with spirits of the dead, or whom the spiritualists regarded as discarnate humans. So,
Right.
right, because life after death is a given, and this is part of the spiritualist doctrine, and that spiritual mediums are gifted, or any type of spirit medium is essentially gifted to carry on communications. And anyone, they believe, spiritualists believed, and people were doing this all throughout the United States, especially in the Burn District during that period from 1849 to 1892, that anyone is capable of becoming a medium through study and practice. And that's what was happening. So it was game on. And the two most essential beliefs is that contacts with the spirit is possible, and that spirits all dwell on a higher plane.
Yes.
And spirits can provide us knowledge about moral, ethical issues, as well about divinity, God, the afterlife, and the future. So
yeah. It was setting the stage for Amy and I, the Lennon and McCartney of divination.
That's right.
That's because and once again, all of this all flies in the face of organized religion, because organized religion inserted themselves in as intermediaries between the person and God or goddess, or however you want to say it. And every time you have something like the Ouija board or divination coming out, they don't like that, because they want to be, people do not want to relinquish their power, which is the reason we're being gaslighted. Okay, absolutely. Just wanted to get that in there.
Yeah, no, I think it's important. And I think with this Uranus Pluto is essentially a counterculture type of archetypal factor. Like anytime you have Uranus Pluto active, especially by conjunction, this was the counterculture to the pervasive Protestant Christian ideal that was largely, part and central of American culture during the 18th century,
right?
19th century, 18th and 19th century. So this is a countercultural spiritualist movement, just like the Uranus Pluto was a countercultural political movement in the 60s. So
and that was in Virgo, and the one that you're showing here is in Aries. And a lot of the spiritualist movement had to do with trying to contact the spirits of the dead,
right?
People who had died during the Revolution War or the Civil War. And then there was another
World War, right? And so
World War I, there was a big spiritualist movement.
That was the post-spiritualist movement. So the foundation was all laid in, essentially between the 1850s and between the 1850s. It was actually a major metaphysical movement that came out of that. The Theosophical movement comes in the 1870 with Madame Blavatsky, but all of the groundwork is laid in the late 1840s and 1850s with the spiritualist movement. And a lot of it goes back to the fact that there was spiritual forces can communicate with living people as well as interfere with their lives to some degree in a good way. And then the interesting part was that many planets in the universe are inhabited by advanced soul spirits that crossed over, that we live in a multi-dimensional universe, that there are planets in other dimensional planes.
Yes, Edgar Casey talked about that a lot. Like if you needed to learn about love, your spirit went to Venus. And if you needed, to learn about time and timing and discipline, you went to Saturn. For those of you who don't know, Edgar Casey was America's sleeping prophet. And a lot of things we take for granted today, he predicted. A lot of health things, actually.
And also reincarnation is brought up. So reincarnation was accepted by the Catholic Church doctrine until the Council of Nicaea. No, I think it was a little bit after the Council of Nicaea, but reincarnation was central to the doctrine up until, let's say, the early medieval era. And then it was negated and was considered heresy. And part of the spiritualist movement, part of this counter religious movement is reincarnation is reintroduced, and it's considered the process where the spirit, once free in the spiritual world, can come back to the world for further learning.
Yeah, that's a hard one. And as somebody, you know, doing all these books that I've done and writing them has made me psychic. But I've actually had, believe it or not, I had a spiritual awakening, but I had a scientific background. I went to Brooklyn Technical High School. I thought I was going to be a scientist in the Air Force or whatever. I know, right? But I've actually had a contact with someone who passed over, and there's no other explanation for it. A friend of mine died, and I didn't know she was even sick. And when I found out about it, Amy asked me, she said, do you have a message from Rona? And I said, tell cousin Betsy I'm not mad at her. And I knew who cousin Betsy was, but as far as I know, that was like her daughter. And I did not know they'd had a fight. Turned out at the funeral, I found out that was the kind of thing you'd hear somebody say on their deathbed also.
Right, right.
And I swear, I could pass a lie detector test. I have no other explanation for it other than somebody on another plane. So that kind of experience exists, but there's a lot of charlatanism connected with that. I don't blame, you know, Houdini, who devoted his life to exposing charlatans. There is a lot of, that's why Amy and I have tried to make divination systems that eliminate the middle gypsy. You know, that's so you do it for yourself. You figure it out if it's right or not.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I also just noticed here that Neptune's in Pisces.
Yeah.
Neptune's in Pisces. And yeah, it's right on the midheaven of the event. This was the actual official event. So Neptune and Pisces conjunct the South Node on the midheaven in Aquarius.
They should have launched a crypto coin.
Maybe that's where the idea came from.
Oh, maybe.
Well, certainly, you know, this had an impact, because what happens later on is we have the Civil War in the 1860s, and you have the White House seance, where First Lady Mary Todd Lincoln, who was really into the occult, held seances in the White House to communicate with spirits of her dead sons, and told friends, right? So this is very common. This was happening quite a bit. And Lincoln, the President Lincoln, attended those seances.
Yeah, because, well, I mean, they didn't have television and they didn't have the movies, so you got to do something.
Right, but both of them took it very seriously, and this was held in the Rose Room in Jackson's bedchamber. Yeah. Right. Well, President Jackson was the president. So it's considered one of the most haunted rooms in the White House, and there's a lot of history behind that.
Jackson was a piece of work, boy.
Yeah, right. So he was a good president, though.
He was a great president, but he was a rollicking president.
Right, right. He wouldn't last long with today's media, but
no, you couldn't cancel Andrew Jackson. That's for sure.
No, you couldn't.
You might try, but I wouldn't. I mean, they called him Stone Wall because he was like a stone wall.
Right. Yeah. So this happens quite a bit. There's quite a bit of psychic and seance activity, paranormal activity happening in the White House during the Lincoln presidency.
Yes.
And this really hit a high point when their 11-year-old son, Willie, died of typhoid fever.
Right.
And there was a lot of, there was the war going on. So there was very little public sympathy for Mary Todd Lincoln. She had a nervous breakdown, or psychotic break, as we would call it today. Yeah. And, she could only be consoled by having these seances. And it was a big issue. It was really, really pulling down Lincoln. I mean, he had to deal with so many things, right? So, anyway, you could see that spiritualism really, really takes off because of the level of death. We had over 600,000 soldiers die from 1861 to 1865.
Right.
That's a lot of, right? That's
they had battles. They had battles where 30,000. Was it Antietam? I mean, they had battles where tens of thousands of people died.
Right.
Mostly men.
Right. And so then after her husband gets assassinated, the only way she can find solace is through, spiritualism. That's why she became very adamant about it. And she became, when she appeared in the press, she talked about it quite a bit. She actually joined a spiritualist commune when she took a trip to New England. And
There's
she
still
actually famously posed with a spirit photographer, William Mumler, who
Huh.
created an image of her husband's ghost with his hands protectively on her shoulders during a seance. And here's the
Wow.
picture. And this is from the Allen
Wow.
County Public Library archives in Indiana. This was taken in 1872. So this was 7 years after Lincoln's assassination.
I would just at this point like to point out a sentence said by one of the great scientists of the Darwinian era. It was Huxley's great grandfather, who said famously, "I'm too much a skeptic not to believe that anything is possible."
Right.
So I mean, I look at that and I myself feel, oh my God, maybe it's fake, but maybe it's real.
Yeah. So, look, this is the point is that, well, first of all, it's very difficult to pull off stuff like this in 1872.
That's
right?
true. They didn't have computers.
They didn't have computers. And this is part of history now. This is something now that's, if you go to White House history, you can actually see.
The Akashic record of the ancients has now been proven to be true. They call it the quantum field now. The quantum physicists call it the quantum field, same thing. The big library where everything's in there, past, present, and future. And so our energy probably does go on. I like to think that, or else who am I talking to? Who am I hearing? Because you said you studied mediumship, and I do it all the time on Mondays on Ask the Oracles. People ask questions and I get answers. I hear them. I've trained myself to respond to questions. Where does that information come from? We're all sort of like radios. If we tune into the Akashic record, or
we're like transceivers. Yeah.
It's just like what's going on behind you in the green screen, the northern lights. We're all energy.
That's right. We're all spiritual beings having a human experience, and we'll go back to being spiritual beings.
Yes.
So when this picture when this picture was taken and it was in a newspaper, it had a big impact in 1872 because it demonstrated that, to the families who had loved ones, soldiers who perished in the battle, were able to find comfort despite, the circumstances of their untimely death. And so spiritualism and let's say so like the spiritualist movement, and not just in terms of just doing seances, although that was like the main activity around it, but it actually shifted people's thinking about God, about the afterlife, all those type of things that have been only under the domain of the church. Only the church could tell you what could be, right? So now it's a very liberating counter-religious movement that actually then unfolds into the theosophical movement, and there was all these other movements, and you see the rise of Edgar Casey, and like you see all of that come out of this. That's all happening around this era during the Uranus-Pluto conjunction, which was still operative at that time.
Yes.
Yeah. Then we get to Halloween Seance, 1927,
Houdini.
1936, with the great, Houdini.
Wow.
Yeah.
And like I said, I mean, he was a great magician, but he famously was going after fake seances and fake.
He was exposing them.
Yeah, because he had a code word, I think, with his wife or mother or somebody, and he was waiting to have somebody who could actually do it.
Right.
But then he was killed by someone punching him in the stomach too hard before he was ready.
Right. Actually, he died of he died of sepsis.
Oh, okay. So blood.
Okay, yeah. So that was the real issue, and I actually read a number of there's a website that goes, how did people truly die in history, and it goes into all of the historical data and sources, and it looks like that did not cause the sepsis. So it sort of triggered something that was already happening with him.
I gotcha.
Yeah. But what's interesting about Houdini is, well, certainly by the time Houdini comes around, by the 1920s, Halloween is starting to become a celebrated unofficial holiday across America. So a lot of people at that time are celebrating it regardless of their religious backgrounds. And Houdini was at the time the world's greatest stage magician and sensationalist escape artist. And he died on October 31st, 1926, right, from sepsis, periodontitis, secondary to a ruptured appendicitis, a ruptured appendix. He dies at 52. He dies quite young.
Sad.
Right. So, and yeah, so his wife held an annual Halloween seance for 10 years that was witnessed on national radio. So people all over the country on Halloween would listen to this seance for 10 years in an attempt to break through the spirit world and communicate with Houdini.
There are people that could do it today. I mean, there's a guy named Jeffrey Wands here on Long Island.
Yeah, I know Jeffrey. I got readings from Jeffrey back in the day.
He's pretty amazing.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a good guy.
I've seen him do amazing things. It's too bad Houdini's wife didn't get together with someone like that.
Right. Well, right. So Houdini and his wife created a secret code, and it's called, right. And so basically he told her because he knew he was dying, I'm going to try and communicate with you. But before you believe anything the medium says, right, make sure that the first thing I will say is the code, the secret code word. And then from there on, you can trust the content coming from the medium. So so it was like,
did anyone ever do it?
No one broke the code. Nobody broke the code. So the first seance was held in 1927 on Houdini's death, like a year after. And so there was like genuine attempts. They got the best psychics and the best mediums they could find. They brought them in. This was on national radio. They were promoting the Houdini name after his death, essentially because 1929 crash came and she was broke. Yeah. She was broke. She invested. So she lost all of Houdini's money because he was overly invested in stocks. And
that was the mania phase, as you put on your
GTA. Yeah. So what happens is that it lasted until the last seance which held in 1936 on the 10th anniversary of his death on the roof of the Knickerbocker Hotel in Los Angeles.
Wow.
So it's interesting, like, there was people all over the country listening to their local radio show of this nationally broadcasted seance on Halloween. Wow. I mean, I think that's right. I mean, it's like
I feel like these are my peeps.
Right. What happened?
Everything's good, as they say nowadays. It's all good. I mean, my wife and I have done, these aren't all the different divination systems that we've done. We've done a lot of them, but I feel like I'm looking at, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, and here you have the giant, as far as I'm concerned, Albert Einstein.
Yeah. And Albert Einstein had a very rich, a very deep and rich understanding of mysticism. Not particularly the occult, but he had a very strong spiritual orientation. And I'll just read this here, one of his quotes. This comes from The World as I See It, 1949. And he quotes, "The most beautiful and deepest experience a man can have is the sense of the mysterious. It is the underlying principle of religion as well as all serious endeavor in art and science. He who never had this experience seems to me, if not dead, then at least blind. To sense that behind anything that can be experienced, there is something that our mind cannot grasp and whose beauty and sublimity reaches us only indirectly and as a feeble reflection. This is religiousness. In this sense, I am religious. To me, it suffices to wonder at these secrets and to attempt humbly to grasp with my mind a mere image of the lofty structure of all that there is.
He was so amazing. I mean, he said you could live as if everything is a miracle or as if nothing is a miracle. So I think
Right.
that's really the choice we all have. And I like to think that everything is a miracle, because just if you're lucky enough to see, if you're lucky enough to hear, if you're lucky enough to have your limbs, I mean, it's all a miracle, folks, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And those trees are a miracle. This television is a miracle. You can just
So yeah,
you could just spend your whole time saying thank you, like Alanis Morissette.
right. So it's interesting now. Let me just bring up the chart of the current Halloween. So Halloween officially starts. I mean, I guess we could put New York or Washington, D.C., but it will start. Let me go here today now. So it officially starts on sunset on the 31st. So that's 8 degrees of Scorpio. And then let me just do this. We'll just put New York. I mean, it's not going to be much different than if
It needs something before it falls apart with no police, firemen, or garbage picker. So they might as well just have people walking around with masks. Maybe they could all dress as cops, firemen, and sanitation workers and go out and pick up stuff.
Right.
And there's Neptune on the ascendant in Pisces.
Yes, yep, exactly. Neptune on the ascendant in Pisces. So this
I
is,
still can't get over that Uranus-Pluto thing, being on these important spiritualist days and being in the 60s, which was a spiritual revolution.
Right. Spiritual revolution. I mean, and what happens in the 60s is Halloween really becomes what? Halloween becomes a major industry.
Oh my God, Halloween is like now the most important holiday in terms of people enjoying themselves and not feeling like they have to go out and get everybody a gift. You know, but they go out and enjoy that, which is sad because Christmas is beautiful. And the music.
So essentially Halloween's a counterculture holiday.
Yes, the New York parade. That's why it's very appropriate that you're doing it for New York, because the New York Halloween parade is a major thing.
Yeah, I think it's the biggest Halloween parade in the country, if not in the world.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting during that conjunction, we saw Halloween, and also that's when like Disney was coming out with Halloween content, Halloween movies. That was all happening in the 60s. There was a real industry and coordination of entertainment in Hollywood really go full throttle with Halloween.
You put your finger on it, because as somebody who used to work in the film business, horror movies are cheap to make. And a lot of people have made their money, like the trauma films. I don't mean trauma like, post-traumatic stress. I mean, it was a company called Trauma. All those horrible horror movies are cheap to make. And they're the ones that really give spiritualism a bad name, because they made everything spooky and everyone's afraid. And if they use the Ouija board, they get scared. And it's, they forget the magic's in us. It's not in all these paper and stuff like that.
Right. And actually the first Halloween ball, which actually was called Halloween and people dressed up, was on October 31st, 1907 at 9 p.m. in New York City at the New York Grand Plaza Hotel.
Huh.
Yeah. So it's a New York Plaza Hotel. And it was, guess what? Neptune on the ascendant. Neptune is on the ascendant. In fact, I'll show it to you.
Just like now.
Yeah, Neptune right on the ascendant.
Wow, that's amazing, because you just showed that Neptune was on the ascendant for the one tomorrow.
Right. So it's during the Gilded Age.
Wow, and Neptune is in Cancer? Wow. Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, so this is the first official American Halloween event. And this was, the big, the nouveau riche, the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers, right, closed their homes in mid-October. They head back to the city, and then they started having Halloween parties. And this was a signal to, this is a signal for society events, high society events, during the winter season. So
plus it gives people, especially people that could be a little locked up in their personality, a chance to be a different person. The word personality comes from persona, which means mask.
Right.
You know, so our personality is the mask we show to other people. It's the rising sign. Halloween gives us a chance to sort of have a new rising sign.
That's right. You could be anything you want.
Right. So that's why me and Amy dress up as Swiss bankers on Halloween. I do the 3-piece suit, and she's wearing Chanel or you know, something like that.
Right.
And nobody
Right.
knows. She covers the purple hair.
What's the wrong date? Somebody says a wrong date. Did I say a wrong date?
This says September 16th, 2021.
Oh, sorry about that. I don't know why I got that.
There must be a reason.
That's,
No accidents, everybody. Come on, we're talking about a spiritual holiday. No accidents.
Right.
What that's the mulligan of spirituality from the 60s. No
Right.
accidents,
Yeah,
man.
no. Because what happens because I
Now it says November 24th.
Yeah, let me just get this. Let me get this right. So let
Hey,
me get
face
it right.
everybody. William's got a
second.
lot of charts locked up in that computer of his.
Yeah.
Sometimes they decide they want to come out.
Yeah, they do. Let me just get this here.
If you think
Can't access my keyboard.
anything could be an oracle, your computer sometimes does stuff. I mean,
Right. It has a mind of its own.
they do, and they're trying to tell us stuff. It's just like, unfortunately, lately I've just seen a lot of pets having a lot of illnesses, as if they're trying to take the illness of their own. I don't want to say owners of their family, and they're taking it on. I don't know if everybody who's watching this is experiencing a similar thing, but we've had our cat and other people. I mean, inanimate objects, quote, or animals, quote, can sometimes be oracles.
Right. Well, maybe Neptune's talking to us and saying, I want to have a say here on this.
Well, you probably remembered that the Neptune was on the ascendant at the first Halloween party, so you wanted to put it there. You know, you had the
right. Unconsciously, right? And
right.
I did that before, right? I did that before I showed the first Halloween ball chart.
Oh, that's interesting. It's precognitive. It's precognitive, dude.
Retrocognition. So
right. It's also so that Mars is kicking everybody's ass now.
Yeah. Well, Mars is in Scorpio, so it'll be interesting to see which masks people were wearing.
Oh my God.
They'll give a list of the top 10 masks kids were wearing for Halloween.
Well, it's probably the squid, whatever, that I think I don't even know what it is, but I see a lot of.
Yeah, we'll find out. They'll come out with the list by within a few days, and we'll find
Mars
out.
is just like 0 degrees, 38 minutes Scorpio. That's
right.
Well, everybody, we'll be telling you all about gaslighting, but
well, that's, it's funny. Neptune is all about gaslighting. I guess this is a good segue to doing it.
Yeah,
because
you could. And Neptune, you have that amazing graphic about showing that the U.S. is having its Pluto return from its chart in 1776, and it's having a coincidence of that with Saturn return and Uranus return. But Neptune in the sky right now is opposite Neptune in the United States' chart. And the last time it was there was when John Brown was hung as a traitor for killing people trying to stop slavery. He should be venerated as a hero. He believed in it so strongly that he raided, Harper's Ferry and the armory and got weapons and unfortunately killed people. But he was trying to end slavery. And I think that's the good part of Neptune. Doesn't want people to be not free. And that's what the gaslighting annoys me, because it's against freedom. Anyway, that's just me.
Well, Neptune in the 12th house is gaslighting from the deep state.
Yes. This is
12th house is the deep state, which doesn't exist, right?
No, and they're not watching this either.
Right. Then how?
And Amy and I are not wearing the labels on our clothes, as I posted on Facebook. It's like, well, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? The trouble with today is the gaslighting is so complete that you can pick any subject, and there's gaslighting going on at a tremendous level. Politics, you don't even have to talk about vaccines and vaccine mandates and stuff like that. You can talk about the supply chain and how they say, oh, there's nothing, the fiat money,
Mhm.
I mean, you can go on forever about the gaslighting.
Mhm. Absolutely.
I,
Absolutely. I mean,
I
you
can't wait to hear
know,
what you have to
it
say about it.
it's really the psychology of shaping other people's reality. And it's interesting you bring up the Pluto return, because the Pluto return is imminent. It's on February 20th. This is the chart of the time and date of the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the ratification of the fair copy document, which according to Hancock in a letter he wrote that we have, occurred sometime, he says, around 2 p.m.
Okay.
So using that chart here, we could see the exact time of the return happens on February 20th, 2022. So the return is imminent and inevitable.
Yes, and everybody, I mean, I wish everybody would join Williams groups, the Global Transformation Astrology and the Crypto Astrology group, because they are so valuable. And I'm not just saying this because he promoted my books. I'm saying this because it's really, really valuable. And seeing what you do every couple of weeks, it's just amazing to me, and you're helping people a lot. Well, Pluto return, I have Pluto on my ascendant, so I've had Pluto my whole life. I know all about it.
You
It's
are
like
walking Pluto.
I'm a walking. I'm. Me and Mickey Mouse. We're really close. And
Right.
I have Pluto and Leo, so I'm like the worst baby boomer you ever, or the best, depending on what you think. And a Pluto return, as
Love
William,
me or hate me.
exactly as
Right.
William said, no empire survives its Pluto return.
Right. Well, no empire survives it without being transformed.
Exactly. So maybe the United States is going to finally admit that it is an empire, or it's going to be transformed. But I'll tell you, if it wasn't for Evergrande, I would say that the Thucydides trap would favor China. But Evergrande is sitting there, talk about gaslighting. Oh, nothing to see here.
Yeah, nothing.
It's just what is, how many times bigger is it? It's
27 times larger.
30 times bigger than Lehman Brothers. And it's
so now, no, let me just correct that. 27 times larger than Countrywide, which actually instigated the crisis. So
Bear Stearns.
Right, with Bear Stearns, that then that basically set a daisy chain set of default events that resulted in the Lehman crisis. So Countrywide happened, I believe, around early January 2008, and the Lehman crisis happened in September of 2008. And at the time when Countrywide went under, everyone said nothing to see here. The stock market went up, housing bubble kept growing, people were spending money, right? Yeah. People were flipping homes. Sounds familiar, right?
Oh yeah.
Evergrande is equivalent to Countrywide, but it's 27 times bigger.
Yeah, and not only that, but according to an article, I think I sent it to you, a very prestigious German reporting system says that they think it might have already happened, that they may have already defaulted, because there's been no reports of Evergrande paying any bondholders. And bondholders are the ones you're supposed to pay. Forget, if you have stocks, you're dead. But if you have bonds, you're supposed to get paid. Right. And they're not paying the coupons. They're saying they're putting the money into escrow, but it's not happening according to this German research organization, because they actually did the research.
Yeah, they do real journalism, unlike
exactly. Here. And that's the whole thing that pisses me off so much about the gaslighting, because everybody who's watching this has a computer, the biggest, most wonderful research tool in the whole world, and the truth is out there, like that television show.
Well, I mean, that's the reason we're living in a world where the degree of disinformation and outright lying has reached such a state of affairs that possibly for the first time we're seeing a majority of people in America and in Europe and in the Western world, wherever that might be, right, that throughout the globe are questioning their own level of sanity. There's a massive disconnect between what they're experiencing and what they're being told is real.
Yes, but that's where it's. I grew up with a crazy mother who was carted off to the insane asylum every once in a while, and a policeman father. And at a certain point, I had to say to myself, you know what? Fuck both of them. I can't let what's going on with them affect me. And I think everybody needs to cultivate a little bit more of an Aquarian attitude, or a Brooklyn attitude, if you want to put it that way, and just say, you know what? I'm okay. I'm going to figure this out. I'm not going to let what everybody says blow me around like a reed in the wind. We have to be very, very strong now. That's the only way to combat this kind of disinformation and gaslighting, is to make your base secure. The first rule of warfare, according to General Clausewitz, the 1st rule of warfare.
Right. And you know, this gaslighting really is connected, and this is appropriate for Halloween, because Halloween's considered like the spooky season, right?
Yeah, right.
So what are the biggest fears? Pluto represents the fears that, right? It represents America's biggest fears. It represents America's shadow. It represents the things that that we are gaslighting ourselves about, but we know at a deeper level are true nonetheless. So there's all these big lies that are being repeated over and over again.
Yes.
Right.
And so you have Black Lives Matter, who are correctly pointing out that, you know, the Constitution says all this great stuff, but it wasn't real. You know, there were slaves there, for God's sakes, you know. And that's what the revolution has to be. It has to be the pursuit of happiness. It has to be guaranteed to everybody, and independence. Not guaranteed happiness, but guaranteed pursuit of it.
Well, I think between now and then, we're going to see a lot of these fears come to a head. We're already seeing it now. So they just did a survey on this, America's biggest fears. This was published in Statistica. And the number one fear was corrupt government officials. And this is far above than a loved one contracting COVID-19 and dying. So that was the second biggest fear. The third biggest fear right under there was widespread civil unrest.
Yes, this is true. This is true, because if you want to see racism, the racism is like in a city like New York, they don't allow poor people to have weapons to defend themselves. So what they're basically doing, oh my God, once again, the whole gaslighting, it's like everything you know to be true. It's so much like 1984, like Orwell's 1984, up is down, good is bad, evil is good. You know, there's so much that needs to be changed with the Pluto revolution, right?
Right. Well, that's the battle for your mind, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, the battle of the mind, politicians, priests, psychiatrists, right? They face the same problem: how to find the most rapid and permanent means of changing a man's beliefs.
Yeah.
So that's right. So
but that's exactly what they're doing. They're giving people drugs.
Because they don't have solutions for the problems, the biggest fears. These are real fears. They're not like, well, these fears, there is no deep state. What it's really saying is there is no deep state. That's the gaslighting message. But really, it comes down to corruption. Right? We have a government operating outside of constitutional boundaries,
and admitting it,
admitting it while denying it.
Like when they extended the moratorium on evictions, they said they knew it was unconstitutional and they were screwing all these landlords, but they're going to do it anyway.
Right.
Which is, you know, that's so Soviet era. We're unfortunately living in a lot. But, you know, and part of me thinks it comes from some people thinking they're doing good and thinking that they can do evil because at the end of the day, they're doing good. But there's a lot of people who just want to stay in power and hold on to it.
Right. Well, that's the thing. That, you know, and the way to stay in power, you have to forfeit civil rights. You have to get people to forfeit their own civil rights.
But that's not going to
happen. As a collective, before fascism can completely dominate. And we are on that verge. So Pluto, for those who don't know this, has to do with fascism.
Yeah. Power. Think of the word plutocracy. There's a reason that's called plutocracy.
Right. Plutocracy is the actual government infrastructure that supports a fascist state that's posing as a democracy. Right. So there is totalitarian democracy. Totalitarian democracy is where people believe they actually have say, but they don't. So they actually vote for people. They actually do vote, but regardless who they vote, they have no say in terms of the policies or they have no say in terms of workable government on a day-to-day level.
Well, that's
And
how
those
it's feeling, right?
politicians don't implement anything of the lip service that they, right? They don't implement what they get elected for.
No, that's a big problem. But you know what? At the heart of it all is a revolution coming. I mean, the other day there were between 50 and 70,000 policemen, firemen, teachers, and other city workers in New York City. They marched across the Brooklyn Bridge. You know what the headlines or the newspapers, the ones that covered it, most of them ignored it, like CNN and those people, they just didn't cover it. They said 5,000 people. You know who counts the number of people at a gathering like that? The police.
Right.
You can't tell the police how many people were there. They know how many people were there. That's what they do.
Yeah. So there's there's no journalism. We're the lawyers. We're the journalists. Right. Where's the fourth estate?
Right.
So,
exactly.
Right. So look, you have, so the list goes on. You have like 51% of Americans fear cyber terrorism. 55% fear economic and financial collapse. 57% fear widespread civil unrest. And you have 80% fearing corrupt government officials.
Right. And they're, by implementing mandates, forget about what you think about vaccines or whatever, by telling people that they have to do things and that they are not free and it's not your body, your choice. Right. They're setting themselves up for a peasant revolt. You know,
yes. We're on the brink of fascism, and that's what the Pluto return's about.
Yes.
And we have to talk about a scary subject. That's as Halloween. Halloween's about death, transformation, rebirth. But in that death, we have to face the shadow elements of the collective as well as our own personal shadow. And that subject today brings us to fascism.
Yeah, unfortunately true. But we are in the United States, which was founded with a constitution which is designed to protect us from fascism. The trouble is even the Supreme Court is not going by the Constitution. So the people have to right the ship, unfortunately. And the only way to do that is through elections. But then you come to the election wall, which is that, are the elections rigged? I don't know. There are people that say that it is. And
you're talking about the big brother apparatus that maintains absolute power and control over the election machines.
I am.
Dominion. Notice Dominion. Go ahead.
Yes. But then you got people like Mike Lindell, who some people actually don't like because of the things he says. But remember, what do fascists fear more than anything else? What do people in power fear? They fear, you showed the Frankenstein movie scene before. They fear the people outside the door with pitchforks and knives and scythes and torches. They fear the coming peasant revolt. And if you look at what's going on with the gaslighting, you can say that it is designed, maybe from the Davos people or the World Economic Forum people, to keep everybody fighting amongst themselves so that they don't go after the people that are actually trying to hose us.
Absolutely.
That's scary. The whole thing with Halloween, we're all going to die. So we're all whistling past the graveyard. Everything we do is whistling past the graveyard. I know that. And I do it, you got to live it. Your choice is, we're going to die anyway. So what do? You sit in a corner and cry, or you do something about it and enjoy your life.
Right.
But at the same time, I don't have children, but for people who have children, you got to make the world a better place. You can't leave them with this.
Wait, hold on. Most of my friends and some family members are getting their children inoculated with the vaccine. They're actually encouraging their children to get inoculated by the vaccine.
If you look at the Japanese study, and I'm talking about facts now, if you look at the Japanese study of the Pfizer, you'll see that they expected the vaccines to stay in the arm when it was injected, but it didn't. And where did it concentrate the most? In the reproductive organs of the mice.
That's right.
And if that happens to young people, and it seems to be happening. We have a personal experience with a woman that is young and got her period for 2 weeks straight when she was injected with it. What happens when grandpa or dad finds out that his daughter can't have kids? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. But there'll be plausible deniability. See, that's the thing. The government sets up plausible deniability right, through their disinformation program, saying we didn't know this, there's no proof of this, we didn't see this. So that's the real issue here, right?
It's the gaslighting.
It's the gaslighting. I mean, one of the other things I want to talk about too is the fact that, you know, the S&P is just top 4,600, right? Fitting like it's the best end to the best month of 2021. And everyone's like, you know, pulling out the champagne and tripling down and borrowing more money on margin.
You have shown in your crypto astrology group chart of the Saturn-Uranus square that this has happened every time there is
every time.
crash.
Right. Every time we had a market-wide melt up into the end of October during a Saturn-Uranus alignment, major alignment, meaning as a conjunction, square opposition, right? Every time we had that, always resulted in a major market crash, not a correction, but a crash somewhere between 40 and 80%. And what we're seeing here is the setup for a type of scenario of what we experienced with the melt up just prior to the .com implosion, where it took 2 years to drop 87%. So it wasn't just a one and done event. So we are like at the precipice of that. And yet we're told every day the economy is better than ever.
Yeah. Talk about gaslighting. I mean, that's like lighting your farts. It's such bullshit. I mean, as you know, I think you said it in one of your webinars about how by 2024 there's going to be a crash. There's just no way around that.
Right.
It might happen a lot sooner.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing is that like what's happening with Evergrande, it really reveals what's happening with China, you know, in terms of its economy, because 30% of the entire Chinese economy, which would be equivalent to 5 trillion. So 30% of their economy and 70% of all the investments Chinese people make is in real estate. So it's not like the stock market, crypto, gold, like America, we have all these different options. 70% of their money is invested in real estate, which is equivalent to 30% of their economy, 30% of the GDP. America, it's only 14, 15%. And 14, 15% almost collapsed America back in 2008. So you have 30% here, double of that, $5 trillion, 70% of people's disposable income invested in that real estate, which is collapsing right before our eyes. And everybody's it's not just China. Wall Street is telling us all, don't worry about Evergrande. It will have no impact.
Well,
that's gaslighting.
Well, you know, I don't know if I told you this, but just before Lehman Brothers went down, I had a friend who was actually one of the former borough presidents of New York City, and he was going to get a job at Lehman Brothers. And he asked me as a friend, well, what, you know, people say they're in trouble. What do you think? And I tried to read psychically the head of Lehman Brothers. And I said, well, he doesn't think there's a problem. Well, obviously there was a problem. But if the guy who's at the head of it doesn't think there's a problem, is not taking any actions to do it, and it turned, and he said it. He was interviewed. He didn't think there was a problem.
No.
So that's what's going on. You know, if you want people,
it's like inflation. It's transitory. There is no problem.
Right, but that's the whole problem right there. It's like if you don't have to censor the news if the people you hire are either true believers or too stupid.
No, they've been drinking the Kool-Aid. Where are the lawyers? Where are the forecasters, financial forecasters, right? I am not a financial forecaster, but it's very obvious to me, and I've been proving this out, right? We're not medical doctors, but we're looking at the CDC data, and it's proving itself out there. The vaccine is not the vaccine is not about a vaccine anymore.
Well, Peter McCullough, who is a doctor and has probably done more peer-reviewed, you know, he's on the board that peer reviews stuff and writes all these things. He says the vaccines have failed. I'm not a doctor, and I don't want anybody to believe. I don't expect anybody to believe a goddamn word I say. You know.
Well, do you need a booster for your measles vaccine that you got when you were 5?
Well, all that is true, but what I'm trying to say is, you want, you know, we're not, I don't live in Las Vegas. I am not a gambler, and not everybody in Las Vegas obviously is a gambler,
No,
but
they're
I am
not.
not,
No,
I am
most
not going
people
to
aren't.
gamble with my health. I have been eating holistically and
Actually,
naturally.
actually, you're gambling with your money if you keep it in the stock market, but that's another thing they're gaslighting you about.
No,
People say, no, my money's safe,
100%.
William. My pension is good. I just want to invest a little in crypto, but my pension is safe. And I go, no, your
No, they're
pension is
not.
not safe.
No, your pension is, listen, if China goes down,
It's taking us all
well, that's
with
just
it.
yeah. And what do nations, I'm not trying to scare everyone for Halloween, but what do nations do when they're in trouble financially? They go to war because
When,
it gets everybody working.
right. When all else fails, they take you to war.
Well, that's what Clausewitz also said. He said war is politics by other means.
Right. Yeah. So look, it's clear like they're gaslighting us on so many levels. And here's the thing. Most of the audience members know this. They're saying, I'm not gaslit, but I have a spouse who is, I have a friend who is, I have most of my family members who are.
Yeah.
I can't even talk to them. I know people saying I'm staying home this year, even though I'm staying in even though COVID's lifting and nobody, but because I can't talk to my family members over things. They cannot, they're telling me I'm just like, right. They see the gaslighting right before their eyes, hidden in plain sight.
Right. And well, you can't convince somebody, unfortunately, when they have, like you said, drank the cool. Listen, if I was vaccinated and someone's coming to me saying, vaccinations are bad, I'd probably want to defend my actions. But I've been wrong a lot in my life. I don't know about everybody else out here who's watching this show. I've been wrong. I've been dead wrong. But I'm not going to risk my life on. I wouldn't buy a car that hadn't been researched for 3 years, that hadn't been developed.
Right.
My car, and probably the car everybody's driving, it was designed and tested for years before they put it on the road.
That's right.
And before, according to Dr. Peter McCullough, once again, I'm not a doctor. I don't expect anybody to believe it. Before a pregnant woman is given a medicine, it's tested for 10 years. 10
years. Yes.
And you have the FDA saying that pregnant women should be injected with the stuff that's been invested.
No, because when you're the effect of gaslighting means experimental equals safe.
Yeah.
Experimental equals safe. Right?
That's a big, and the thing is, I'm sure there are people who think it really is safe and really believe it.
I believe 40% of America poll believes that the vaccine is safe and effective. 40%.
The people at the top who are pushing it, because these mandates are going to have, if you have 20% less police, firemen, pilots, Jesus, right. Truck drivers, 20, even if it's 20%, the country's going to go down. There's going to be shortages to the point where they're going to have to change their minds and stop indoctrinating people with this bullshit.
Right. Well, there's not enough people to actually build homes now. So they're moving to 3D printing down in Austin, a very conservative, 100-year-old family business. Construction has now hired a tech firm to show them how they can 3D print homes in Austin, because there's just not enough guys to build the homes now.
Yeah.
They're either not showing up, right, or they have to be vaccinated. Or, there's all different reasons, but there's just not. So what's going to happen is technology is going to be making people obsolete very quickly as a result of all of this.
Well, yeah. I don't see any 3D homes being printed out here
it's coming.
But
it's coming.
I know for a fact that the price of things is 3 times what it was. Price of wood, price of all these things.
But that's only transitory. Gotcha.
Well, listen, the astrology is very, very clear about all this. The Pluto return in the United States cannot be avoided.
Well, if the Pluto return is equivalent, look, I showed a lot. I proved out over and over again, to the point that we had one astrologer down in Florida says, I'm leaving your group because you're repeating yourself, which I'm not. I'm showing different angles on how the Pluto return impacted the Roman Empire, economically, militarily, politically. And people would say, William, when you describe what happened in Roman Empire during that period, almost sounds exactly like what's happening now. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I got some news for that guy in Florida who quit. When I was writing my first book, Karma Cards, I was edited by some really good people in England. And they told me, this is how you write a book. You tell them what you're going to say, You say it and you tell them what you just said. You can't say it too many times because A, everybody's busy, everybody's distracted. You got to tell people something more than once or they don't get it. Advertisers know that.
Right. Well, I was showing it from like 5 different angles to destroy all the plausible deniability and cognitive dissonance that could possibly merger up into GTA membership, because we cannot get to solutions if people still are like, well, I don't know. Yeah, it's pretty convincing, William, but so I want to decimate that. And either I decimate that in my presentation or you decide to leave, which is fine with me because I don't have any time and room for people who want to remain, who want to continue drinking the Kool-Aid.
The whole problem, first of all, decimation is not enough. You got to annihilate them, because
yes, that's what I meant.
The word decimate came from when the Roman army, when a company failed, the leader would come over and take every 10th guy and kill him,
right,
push him off a cliff.
Right. That wasn't enough. We need to annihilate Pluto.
Well, because the whole thing is, as Gurdjieff said, I can go into my baby boomer.
I know who he is.
Bullshit. As Gurdjieff said, to get well, you must know you're sick. And if you don't tell people what's going on, how can everybody make the correct decisions? Because right now we're all on our own. That's the thing with gaslighting shows us we can't trust the media. We can't trust the people who run hospitals. They're firing doctors and nurses who know more than anybody else if the vaccine works or if it's healthy for you. I mean, you're firing. Either there's a conscious decision to crash the economy, or it's just coinciding with the Pluto return and the Uranus return and the Saturn return.
Right.
People can look at us and say, oh, you guys are astrologers. Oh, yeah, well, whatever. But I happen to say the astrology works in this case perfectly.
God, it's going to work. It has been working perfectly, except most of the astrological community is also drinking the Kool-Aid and has been gaslit. And that is the truth. And people watching this know exactly what I'm talking about.
Well,
so look, that's why we're doing this. I mean, that's why part of what we do, because it's fun. And I think it's interesting when we talk, but it's also sharing that, hey, we're seeing a massive schism and split happening, not only in society, but also in the metaphysical community, where people call themselves astrologers and endorse, basically acting as, doing exactly what CNN does when they talk about Biden and Kamala and the border. And no, this is pervasive and systemic.
Wait a minute. Here's the thing. Remember I was saying before about everybody has to get into their Brooklyn and be a little Aquarian and not give a fuck? I don't know any of this stuff because I don't follow anybody except you. And I read Theodore, but he hates the baby boomers. But what can I say about that? he's almost got me convinced to start hating myself as a baby boomer. He's a good astrologer. What can I say?
Right.
Are you saying that there are people who are astrologers who,
yes,
if they heard us talking, they wouldn't agree with what we're saying?
Right. They would probably not even get through half of this presentation.
Wow. What would they think? They think, well, the Pluto return is wonderful. What, are you kidding me?
Yeah, I mean, they don't address the dark side or shadow side to Pluto at all.
Pluto is total shadow side.
Well, I mean, they talk about transformation as if it's a graceful event.
Pluto is the humus. Pluto is the death that gives birth to life, but you got to have the death to give birth.
Yeah, there's a lot of drama connected around Pluto. There always is. So. Yes. We're seeing, look, the creative destruction of what's happening to the global economy, to China, to America, the fact that the world reserve currency is basically imploding, right? We're seeing, I mean, you have like people like CEO Jack Dorsey. He's not my favorite guy in the world, the Twitter.
But he has Twitter. I watched your show yesterday. Yeah. It was amazing.
Yeah. And basically he knows more about what's happening in inflation because of his companies than the Fed does. And the Fed is aware of this. They are aware.
Oh, they were all aware of it, but they're gaslighting us.
For those who don't know, inflation is the kryptonite to markets and the economy and eventually to government, because it is the thing that creates social revolution the fastest.
Yes. And also contracts are locked in at certain prices. It's like I'm paying off my windows. We had our windows, replaced. I'm going to be paying off this thing for a long time, but with inflated dollars. So the company that I'm paying, that I'm contracted to pay, is getting the same amount of dollars that they originally agreed, but if the dollars are worth less, that freaks them out and they go out of business because they're getting a certain amount. You know, it's a cascade. The whole economic system, we're all interconnected, but that's why I'm still, I don't care what they say about Evergrande. I'm still worried about that.
No, I mean, you have Evergrande imploding while global food prices are soaring as oil and gas crunch continues, as the supply chain begins to break down and accelerate and intensify even further, right? So we have skimflation, shrinkflation, the rising rebellion of workers, people not refusing to work. Look, we are at a perfect storm. Pluto returned, the perfect storm.
Yeah.
And the denial and the gaslighting will continue to escalate, right? Because what other thing are they going to do? They're out of options. They cannot maintain power. What else can they do?
That's what they're afraid of. And one of the most important shortages that we have not discussed at all is the chip shortage, because that has screwed up the automobile business.
Right.
And
they're building cars that they have to keep there for at least a year until they get the chip.
Right, because that's what the supply chain is telling them now. It used to be 19 days. Everything is just in time. Saturn rules time. So you have Uranus and Saturn square, just in time ordering don't work no more. Uranus said, you know what? Fuck that. No more. You guys are dependent on this just in time bullshit. You don't know what you're doing. And so now it's like you said, a year for the chips. And in October, it was 22 weeks to get the chips.
Yeah. So look, this is, yeah. And so you have all of this. I mean, Germany cut its GDP forecast by 25% due to the supply chain shortages and soaring energy cost.
Yeah, 25%. That's 25. Like a depression. That's a depression.
Yes, that is a depression.
Yeah.
Right. And at the same time, Germany's also they're banning unvaccinated people from the Berlin Christmas markets. Now, how could you be doing that? Because you're going to take a 25% cut in your GDP.
It's total disconnect between what's logical.
Right. So the gaslighting must be going so well, because that would certainly invoke another beer push hall revolution, if you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
What actually created the rise of Adolf Hitler?
Well, the way they were treated after World War I.
Which created what?
Which created hyperinflation.
Bingo. It went from inflation. We got it under control.
Yeah, but that's
hyperinflation.
As you said in your group, you said he just tweeted that there is going to be hyperinflation, or it's here already.
Yes. So you have a lot of brilliant people out there saying hyperinflation is imminent and inevitable. It's just a matter of like the agreement. There's slight disagreement on what month it will hit next year. Oh, well, I'm an astrologer. Maybe it'll start around February. Right. But that doesn't count. That doesn't count. Right. Because we're just astrologers. We don't know anything. We don't understand anything.
We're just a bunch of new age hippies, and you're not even a baby boomer, so they can't hate you.
Right.
But people, I love people. The reason Amy and I do our business is because we really love people. We're trying to help them. We know how hard it is, because it's hard for us too. Even with all our advantages and our privileges or whatever, we're very, very fortunate people. We want to help people. But the chip shortage has impacted, everybody talks about the cars. No one's talking about the farm equipment, because used tractors are selling for more than they cost when they were new, because there just ain't no tractors.
That's right.
And if there's no tractors, that means there's no food.
That's right.
I mean, that's why we have to get leaders.
They don't have a choice. They have to continue to distract us, divert us, befuddle us, right? So we don't tune in to what's really going on in this country. And this just doesn't apply to the U.S. It applies to every country's government in the world. But the U.S. going through the Pluto return, that's where the center of the show is going to be. That's the big show. We're a big, what Paul McCartney would say, we have a big act, right?
Yeah.
So, the money elite, the power elite view all of us and everyone as an expendable resource to be used, abused, discarded, annihilated if necessary.
Well,
and they will do
unfortunately,
everything.
you might be right. You might be right. They think of us as, we have too many animals on the farm. We got to cull a herd. I hope that is not what's going on. But then you have all these businesses, like everyone's always on Bill Gates. But you got to admit, Microsoft went from, I'm selling you this disk that you can put in your disk drive to, they went over to the business model that is the same exact business model of a heroin dealer.
That's right.
You got to pay me every month for your software.
Right.
You know what I mean? So they're trying to get everybody to buy a vaccine every month.
That's right. That's right.
I just think we have to write to the people that lead us, the Congress and all these people, and get them off their ass.
I think if we don't see a major disruptive political earthquake by the 2022 midterms, we don't see that happen, then you could be sure that fascism finally has taken hold in America. And the powers that be know that. They know they've got to do everything it takes. They've got to look, but the problem is they've run out of time. They don't have solutions. No. They cannot extend and pretend anymore. I mean, the news media, will continue to cover entertainment, political trivia. They're going to, besides the gaslighting, they're going to feed us more entertainment, political trivia. This is all part of Pluto. Look, the breads and circuses of what Rome did leading up to the crisis of the 3rd century that correlated with its Pluto return is exactly what America is doing now with its political trivia and all that other stuff. So it's really no different.
No, it's true. And allegedly, according to this woman who did our past lifetimes, I was a gladiator back then and advised them on making more horrendous displays of bloodshed to keep everybody distracted from the tremendous taxation. And that is what's going on. But what do you think is going to happen in the Virginia election, or is that outside the scope?
I think the Republicans going to win. It's not official yet. I just did some more. I just looked at it again this morning, and I did a preliminary political contest horror, and I expected, I said, well, all right. I looked at it, and then I looked at the latest polling numbers, and I'm seeing an upset in the making. It's going to be very, very tight. This is going to be one of the tightest elections, gubernatorial elections we've seen in the history of the United States.
It's hard for me to believe that it's going to be tight when you have the actual candidate putting up a sign saying parents have no right to tell teachers what to teach their kids. I mean, when I looked at that, I said, oh, this must be disinformation from the opposite camp. It turns out it's not.
It's not. Yeah, that's true. So it's going to come down to, what do they call it? Racial education. What do they call it?
Critical race theory.
Critical race theory and education is going to be the driving decider of this election. Meanwhile, the unemployment rate in Virginia is double digits. The inflation rate in Virginia is extremely high. It's much higher in New York, of course, right? Thanks to your wonderful governor. But and California, it's even worse than that. So you're the second between you and New Jersey, right?
New Jersey is pretty bad, and New York is pretty bad. But the thing with the mandates are unconstitutional. They never had the powers to do all these things that they've done and that they're continuing to do. And the Supreme Court is not backing up the Constitution.
No, they don't back because they don't even have nothing has standing.
Right. No one has standing.
Nothing.
But the thing that gets me every once in a while is I have a lot of friends out here that hate it. And I mean hate it.
Hate what?
They hated Donald Trump. But they're taking a vaccine that is the result of him putting
but that doesn't count.
But that just
but that's what I'm saying. They'll say to you, but that doesn't count. Monte, that's true, but it doesn't count.
Yeah, but that's gaslighting.
Exactly.
Right. So I'm sorry, but I'm more into the Socratic method of reason, which I guess flies in the face of gaslighting.
Yeah. So look, I just want to go back to Pluto here, because this definitely what we're talking about here is, where the oligarchical elite that do not exist, that's all part of conspiracy theory or controlling the government behind the scenes. 12th house.
Pluto is underground. Pluto is Hades.
That's right. So they're pulling the strings behind the scenes. So the oligarchical elite pull the strings of the bureaucrats and the people that make things happen in Washington. And as a result, we are moving towards a sort of like corporatism, which is really, we're already in corporatism. And the Pluto return is the road to a full blown, all out, no holds throttled back fascism. Right. So we're entering fascism next year unless we stop it.
Well, how would you suggest it? I mean, I think that we have to contact our leaders. How would you, I do not advocate violence. I've been the victim of violence in my life.
Yeah. So I'm not going to advocate violence, but I think we need to have the level of social and political activism. And I'm not just saying go out in the streets and protest in front of your local library, but what I'm saying is we need to have the social and political activism we saw in the 60s.
Yes, and the Soros cycle for the eclipses coming up, right, is from 67. And as somebody who lived through 67, we had 1 million people march in New York City one day against the war in Vietnam. I'm talking about 1 million people. They filled Central Park, and we stopped the goddamn Vietnam War. The people, say what you want about the baby boomers, and yes, they're being culled with the vaccines and all this other crap, but we stopped a war. And if we can do that, you all, you millennials.
This is going to be a lot tougher, believe it or not, because
I think so.
Yeah.
Because they in that time I'm talking about 67, cared what somebody said. Now they don't care.
They don't care, right? Well, this goes back to John Carpenter's film They Live, right? And if did you see the film? This is Halloween, so everybody who haven't seen the movie They Live, now is the time. And even if you've seen it, see it again. Watch it. It's actually, it's not a scary movie at all, but it's very appropriate for Halloween. And essentially what he says is, quote, and I have this quote here, I'm just going to put it here because I think it's appropriate for Pluto, is, quote, "They are dismantling the sleeping middle class. More and more people are becoming poor. We are the cattle. We are being bred for slavery." That is the core meaning of that film.
Yeah, it's possible. Listen, I had a friend when I was growing up who only stole from his friends. I learned at an early age that there are evil people. There are. And the reason they're evil doesn't really matter. There are people that have been convinced that they're not stealing your money. They're taking their money that you somehow happen to have in your pocket.
Right.
That's how thieves think. And so that it is possible. Once again, I'm too much a skeptic not to believe anything.
No. And the Pluto is going to reveal that the government is working against its own citizens. We have a populace that's out of touch with reality, that's being gaslit. We have, we have a future that we're heading towards, which is much more dystopian than any horror film that we've seen.
Good. It could be good if people get their act together and exert pressure in a proper way. Right. And make sure that they're as independent as they could, get a little bit of crypto going, get out of the
get a lot of crypto going. I at this point, I think we got to just be honest here.
Yeah, but
get a lot more crypto going and get it done now.
Well, yeah, I mean, your prediction for crypto is very accurate. Bitcoin's what, 63 today, something like that.
Yeah, right. I've been saying this for weeks, way before, all these different sites and BitBoy and all these guys, right? See, but because I'm an astrologer, Monte, it doesn't count. See, this is the problem. Astrologers actually put more credence, people who are psychics put more credence on these other people than the very people they should be looking at, right? This is the problem.
That's crazy. But
it's true.
That's more that's rocket fuel gaslighting.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, I can tell people that William's been telling people about Bitcoin for a decade, if not more. And his predictions are accurate when he does these black boxes and all this other stuff.
The greatest secret that's going on, that even the financial astrologers, you're listening to me, financial astrologers that are in denial about, that have been gaslit about, is that Bitcoin's outperformed every investment instrument in creation inside of 10 years, including silver, and on the verge of, and actually surpassed the price of gold a long time ago, but outperformed even the S&P 500, which outperforms every instrument out there. So Bitcoin is by far the greatest financial innovation in the history of the world. And 99% of the astrological community and nearly 100% of the financial astrological community is clueless about this and continue to deny it.
Well, that's insane.
It is insane, but that's how insane they have been gaslit by their own financial community because they want to be into the stock market. They want to have credibility within, right? So that's the issue. So that applies. So what? Look, you don't think the Pluto returns about Bitcoin becoming the world reserve currency, everyone, and supplanting the US dollar? Think again.
Yeah, because the Chinese are trying to do it with the renminbi, the digital renminbi. But I think Wall Street, the smart money, knows that Bitcoin is the way it's going to happen.
But they don't want you to know it yet because they have to get how much Bitcoin is out there?
Not enough.
Not enough. So they got to get it. So you can't. It'll be too prohibitively difficult and expensive for you to get the Bitcoin. Because right now it's pretty cheap to get the Bitcoin. It's still available. So they're not going to tell you. They're not going to tell you, folks, especially the astrologers.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, I am not an expert mundane astrologer as is William, but I'm a pretty fucking good astrologer, and I have
that's for sure. I'll vouch for that.
Well, thank you. And I happen to know that what William's talking about is the truth because it goes with everything I've studied. And I've studied a lot of good people, and William has actually studied in person with a lot of good people. And when learning to know when you hear the truth and learning to know who to trust is a big issue with the gaslighting. And I just want to say, I trust you, William. You've been right. And that's how you find out who to trust. You see what they say and you find out if they're right.
Yeah, you see if right. Yeah, exactly. Like, look, the proof is in the pudding, as they say.
It's 100% true. And those, I don't want to be condemned to repeat history because I don't know it. I know you're a historian. I've always been into history. And the history right now is telling us that the Second American Revolution is going on right now.
Right. We're like in the early phase because for right now we have a population out of touch with reality.
Well, they're about to get it really in touch with reality because the shortages are just getting started.
Right. So Monte, what do you think February is going to be about? I know, like, I don't expect anything particular to happen on February 20th, but by the time we get into February, that'll be one full year of a Biden-Harris, emphasis on Harris, administration. What do you think we're going to be at?
I think there's going to be, at the very least, this is easy to predict, there's going to be a crisis because Pluto is all about crisis.
Right.
And it's all about existential crisis because it's life or death. The other planets, Uranus is, it's going to disturb, Uranus doesn't play like that, but Pluto don't play at all. Pluto,
it plays for keeps.
Exactly. So I think there is going to be an existential threat to something in the United States' existence.
Right.
I don't know what it's going to be, but as an astrologer, that's what I would predict: an existential crisis.
If you knew what it was, you probably wouldn't believe it.
Well, it could be something
that's
like
Pluto.
It could be packing the Supreme Court. It could be.
It's like, because the only reason I state that is because Pluto deals with the unfathomable.
Well,
so your own psyche will reject the unfathomable, even though the evidence was presented to you.
Well, that's just
beforehand.
Like we have a generation who was born with Pluto and Scorpio. And the generation that was born with Pluto and Scorpio, they have depth feelings that are unfathomable to me. And I know this when I read for them and I tell them straight out. I say, you have Pluto and Scorpio. I don't pretend to know what that means. It's so beyond words. When you're Pluto in Scorpio represents beyond words. It's unfathomable depths. So it's, and there are certain things that cannot be predicted. And I think we'll look at the other nation. Look at what happened to Rome. When Rome went through its first Pluto transit, it went from being a republic to
a
Augustus Caesar.
Right. So it went from, so just to do a quick review here. So they had a republic, just like we did, right? They had a republic, they had a Senate, they said they had a House of Representatives, they had judges, they had a king, right? But he was like the president, right? He didn't have total power.
And they killed Caesar.
Right. Then, well, what happens is there's a civil war that breaks out, and it's not a full-blown civil war, but it's where Caesar seizes control to prevent the Republic going into a full-blown civil war. So they give him like extraordinary powers. The Senate gives this to him to be the solution, the temporary solution. And they were never planning, by the way, to become an empire. And then what happens is things get out of control. And then you see the emergence of Augustus, who becomes the first emperor, and he's quite brilliant. He's considered one of the greatest leaders. He's right up there with Washington, Napoleon. He's a phenomenal mind, and he basically jumpstarts the Roman Empire, which becomes the world's first superpower inside of his lifetime. And that's Pluto. That all happened during the Pluto return.
So maybe we will get someone like Augustus. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Somebody who actually can deliver. I mean,
it's not Kamala?
I know you think she's going to be reelected, or you say it so that
actually I say that to get people's interest, because if I didn't write that, Facebook would eventually
I know that's what
me,
you're saying.
Right? So yeah.
But I think, I mean, when somebody says, and the august leader of this country, they're talking about Augustus.
Correct.
His name means revered.
Right, revered.
Powerful,
right.
And
right.
And so maybe that's what it's going to be. We're going to get an Augustus.
Right.
I don't know who it is. I know it's not me. I know. I know
you can advise Augustus, the future Augustus.
I'd be more than happy to if I found him. But good. I'm telling you, we need someone to get off their ass and do something soon. Because every day I look at the news, I'm like, when are they going to perp walk somebody? When is somebody going to pay for this?
Yeah.
Well, look, liars going to be arrested. I don't understand.
Well, look, they're what do they call it? Their cognitive dissonance programs built into their hidden messaging, based on, what do they call it? Virtue signaling and hidden messages. It's like you have a hidden message inside of your virtual signaling, which is being drummed into the people's subconscious mind. No independent thought. Do as we say, not as we do. Conform, submit, stay asleep. Watch more Netflix. Watch more TV. Don't imagine, don't question, don't try, just buy. Don't try, just buy, because we're a consumption economy, right? 75% consumption economy now. We used to be 75% manufacturing economy. When you were born, Monte, we were 75% manufacturing economy. We went from 75% to 8%. That's considered, and we increased our consumption. So this is what's happening. It's this indoctrination campaign. And it's even happening to people in our own, loose community who, that's the look, at least the baby boomers, the astrologers back then, right? They didn't buy into that. That type of messaging was, they were impervious to that type of messaging, where the ones today are totally about conforming.
Well, we were called a counterculture for a reason.
Right.
We don't trust anybody, but if CNN reported on our talk, they would only report what you just said, as if you were like a huckster for everybody. Just buy, don't try, all that stuff. That's what they would take out of our 2-hour discussion, which we're coming up on 2 hours.
Right.
Would be all that stuff. And that's the gaslighting. And I really love talking to you, man.
Yeah. So, pacified zombieism. That's the ultimate achievement.
Yay!
Well, and isn't zombies part of Halloween? So I think this is the year of the zombie.
Wow. Well, all I can say is we had like 70 people for most of our discussion for 2 hours. If we can get people to stay around, 70 people to stay around for 2 hours of our kind of conversation, there's hope for the future.
There is hope, at least for 70 people in the United States. Well, all right. So we're going to wrap it up here. So let's wrap it up.
Okay.
We covered a lot of ground with our, the zombie-like, the final result of the gaslighting and Halloween is the zombie. So let's just call it for what it is.
If there's one thing I'm ready for, it's the zombie apocalypse.
Right. And by the way, didn't Gajif talk about that people are asleep? They're like zombies.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So look, everyone out there, I'm going to just suggest, watch the movie that I suggested, right? Just watch They Live. Watch They Live. It totally encapsulates. It's a sci-fi. It's like a sci-fi horror type of film, but it's more sci-fi, and it's really funny. There's parts of it are really, really funny, and it's really a powerful film. Which what do they call it? It's a film that that's telling you a different story, a
Okay.
much deeper story about the real agenda at work in people's lives, and how people were lulled in complacency and indoctrinated into compliance and all that stuff. So
Yeah. And somebody else said also watch Idiocracy, which is an amazing movie.
yes, that's another one. I was just mentioning that because it's much more without giving away what the movie's about. It's much more Halloweeny. It's much more of a Halloween classic, film.
Well, thank you so much for having me and sharing.
Oh, well, thank you for joining us, and I really had a great time today. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I hope we learned a little bit more about Halloween, and we also have people here from Canada, Australia, and Brazil, and
Wonderful.
more. So look, folks, this is also happening in your country as well. So
Yep.
watch, there's a number of films you could watch. The Blob, In the Mouth of Madness. There's a bunch of They Live, but try and watch They Live. You'll know exactly what Monte and I are referring to. So Monte, you want to give them your website, how they can contact you?
It's theenchantedworld.com or Monte with an E, montefarber.com, or my wife's amazing website, Amy Zerner, ZERNER.com. And thank you so much to everybody. I know a lot of people who are watching here have our work. We're out there trying to turn back the tide of fascism, and the only way to do that is to empower individuals, just like William does with his groups. I hope everybody who's not a member of his groups joins at least one of them, preferably both of them.
Yeah, absolutely, Monte. And it was great having you here again. It's been a while since we talked. It seems like it's been a long time. We'll have to do this much more. Well, we'll certainly have to do one around Thanksgiving. Certainly
Or for the eclipses.
For the eclipses, for sure. Absolutely. And for everyone who's new to this, you could reach out to me via williamstickevers.com, or you could check out my membership group, Global Transformation Astrology, at gta.williamstickevers.com, along with Crypto Astrology Group as well. So check that out. You can go to my blog. Happy Halloween and Samhain, everyone. Have a good night. Take care.
Bye, everybody.